you behaved perfectly appropriately.
Yeah.
This is the time to treat yourself.
Yeah, we'll cheers to that. Cheers.
Yep. I've got lemon, lime, and bitters.
Excellent.
Hello.
I'm working. Hi.
Cheers.
Hello, Matt and
Laura.
Who's Laura? Hello, Matt and Laura. And who's with you, Hannah? I can't hear you.
Scott's with me.
G'day.
Oh, hi, Scott. Hello. And we got Tara. I believe I know you. I believe you are maybe Cody's wife. Nope. Okay, I might have just made that up.
No, but I like that you came
Corey.
up with
Corey's wife. Corey's wife. And we've got Emrina. Lovely. I think there are people still coming, but just a little bit of housekeeping. So have your camera on so that you can interact if you want to. If you have, I can see that you've all got your names. Great, because if you do have a question or I want to, throw to you or anything, it's good to see what your name is. The structure, I'll probably wait until we all get here, but who's with you, Daniel?
This is Claire, my fiance.
Hi, Claire, nice to meet you. Ooh, congratulations. How did he do it?
Just on the living room.
Just on the couch. Pretty chill.
It was just a spontaneous in the moment. Marry me.
We were in Canberra, and then we woke up in Canberra on a Sunday morning, and we are supposed to have a lunch and a dinner there. And Claire had a runny nose in the morning, and so she didn't know that I was planning on proposing to her in Canberra. So we had to drive home and get tested for COVID in Bondi, and then came back home. And then a couple of hours later, I was like, now's as good a time as any. So, and there we go.
That's cute. Yeah. Great.
No, I don't have COVID, by the way, just FYI, so everyone knows. I'm COVID free.
Me neither. Yay. Not that there's anything wrong with you if you've got COVID. We don't want to COVID shame people. But it's good that you don't have it.
Yeah, I'm pretty pleased about it, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. Hi, hi.
Yeah, and just some sweet wine.
Lambrusco, lovely. Yep.
Yeah.
I can see lots of people relating. I can see people eating and drinking red. Yes, lovely. And Rina, where are you calling from?
Hello, I'm from Singapore as well. And I'm having beer. Can't see.
Beer?
Kirin beer,
is it
yeah.
Singapore beer or is it Asahi?
From Japan, Kirin beer.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And it looks
great
like
for the weather.
Yeah, lovely. And it looks like you guys are eating dinner up there in Matt's place.
Yes, we are having the healthy cauliflower and potatoes and chicken and some red wine. Calling from
Gorgeous.
my beach.
Tiny amount of red wine.
Gorgeous. All right, so this is also being streamed to YouTube courtesy of the IOC, and I've put a link there for charity for donation to the AIDS Trust of Australia. So you guys who are watching on YouTube, hello to you, and please feel free to give if you can, because they're a great charity. So the structure of this, I usually, I tell my story, and I leave 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions. But I'm happy to, if you have a burning question, just fire it out. Just wave at the camera so that I can, get you, so that I can call you out. Because I'm happy to be interrupted. I like to keep it pretty flexible. I do have a reputation for being flexible, so I like to keep that up. So I think that we've got a Brian Zamora who is still connecting to audio, but we're already 6 minutes past. So and I know already what you're all eating and drinking, and where most of you are calling from. So welcome to those who are calling from overseas. And me, I am in Melbourne at the moment. I was in LA in March filming a TV show, but I was living in the UK, but I was over in LA filming a TV show. And then the government started urging all Australians to come back to Australia when COVID started happening. And so my husband was like, I think they're going to close the borders. And so we flew straight back to the UK, packed up our flat in 2 days and flew back to Australia and made it back 9 hours before they shut the border to non-residents. And my husband's a non-resident. So made it back just in time. And so we've just moved into a lovely place in Melbourne. So I'm calling from Melbourne. I am drinking lemon lima bitters, and I am super happy to be speaking with you guys. So my name's Matthew Mitcham. I guess you know me as being a diver. I grew up in Brisbane, actually. I grew up like just completely unsporty, like the most unsporty person ever. Like never won a ribbon in the swimming or athletics carnivals. You know, at lunchtime when you go down to the oval and they'd pick off for soccer or cricket or football, always last to be picked. Like even all the girls got picked before I did. Like that's how unsporty I was. But I remember having, and it's probably a product of, so I grew up as the only child of a single parent who had some mental and some physical problems as well, and spent a lot of my childhood just in bed. And so, and like the only real sort of positive reinforcement or validation I got was when I did something really good. And so as a child, I think logically, I then reasoned that, well, if I become the best in the world at something, then I'm going to get all the love, and, you know, mum's going to love me, and I'm going to get all the attention, and I'm going to feel sort of happy. And so I didn't even had no idea what I was going to be the best in the world at, but that was my dream, to be the best in the world at something. I was lucky that I was given a backyard trampoline by my granddad's girlfriend at the time. It's a very, very functional family. But so I started getting lessons and found my niche, basically. Found that I was actually good at a sport, and it's probably no surprise that it was a sport that required leotards and being competitively pretty. That was my niche. And that transitioned quite smoothly into diving. And so I was training with the AIS right from the age of 11. And I was always good as a teenager, but I started having some problems at home at about 14, and problems within the training environment as well, because, you know, it was becoming plainly obvious that I was very different in a very flamboyant kind of way. It was, but I wasn't comfortable enough to tell anybody, because I'd been training with these people for 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for the last 3 or 4 years. How could I then tell these people that I have spent so much time with that I've been effectively sort of deceiving them for the last 3 years? Like it was really hard for me to get my head around that. And so I didn't. And so I consequently ended up feeling quite alienated within my training environment, because there was, everybody could see that there was something wrong, but because I wasn't being forthright, they didn't know how to navigate those obstacles, because I wasn't being open about, you know, what was going on. So I consequently ended up feeling very alienated within my training environment, and was starting to have problems with the coach as well, because I was starting to have my own issues, and my coach's coaching style was corrections only, like only giving me the corrections, but having nothing but corrections coming at me, and hearing it through a filter of, you know, low self-esteem. It just sounded like criticism, nothing but criticism all the time. And so I ended up hating diving from about 14 to 18. I was really, really resentful.
we still in Brisbane?
And-
Sorry.
Yeah, this is in Brisbane. But I kept doing it because, I saw diving as my ticket to being special. Like my one chance. And so, that kept me going through even when I was not enjoying diving at all. And so I would go to training and I would just train on autopilot, like mentally switched off, just get in, train on autopilot as quickly as possible and get out as soon as I could. And like I was always a good diver, but I was never great. Like, I missed out on the Athens Olympics by one place in all 4 events. So, I was always just kind of on that just under, good. And it eventually just wasn't enough for me when I was 18. It wasn't enough. And so I retired. I retired at the ripe old age of 18. I hung up the Speedos. And I basically just spent that year doing all the partying that I didn't do as a teenager, but like cramping it in. And so I did lots of very, very unhealthy things with my body every night, like for, that entire year. Spending too much time in seedy places, doing seedy things with seedy people. It was just, just really unhealthy. And it took me about 6 months for me to stop hating diving, and probably another 3 months for me to actually start missing it. And it was in about that 3-month period where I got this text message from a coach in Sydney who had said to me, look, Matt, if you ever want to start diving again, I'll always have a place in my squad for you. And it was just the way that text message was worded, in a really nurturing, not pushy way, just no strings attached. And I, knowing him from seeing him around the competition circuit, and knowing he was a good guy, I knew that he cared for my welfare as a human being more than my welfare as an athlete. And so I gave it a shot. I moved to Sydney, desperately poor, didn't have enough money for insurance for the car. But still, spent a lot of time in the car, searching for shrapnel, like the tracks on either side of the seat where the seat slides backwards and forwards. So like just, wading through the old French fries, looking for shrapnel, and looking under couch cushions and, in old training bags and everything, just to get the money together for train fares. I had to, so I would catch the train from sort of, I don't know if a lot of you aren't familiar with Sydney, so there's no point really going into detail, but yeah, so in between, morning training from 6 to 8:30 and afternoon training from 3 to 6:30 or 7, I would work in an office as an admin assistant for 5 hours, and it took 3 trains to get from the pool to the office, and then another 3 trains to get back again. And I was always running from the train station to the pool, or the train station to work, or the work back to the train station, because, I was always cutting it fine because the trains always took so long, and I was always so exhausted, and, often fell asleep on the train and missed my stop, and then had to get back on the train and come back again. Lived basically on cereal for breakfast, 2-minute noodles and a tin of tuna for lunch, and baked beans on toast for dinner is like all I could afford, because I came back only 15 months before the Beijing Olympic Games, which was not ideal timing, having had a year off doing very unhealthy things with my body, and so initially my goal was just to make the team for Beijing. Because I'd never been to an Olympics before. It was always something I really wanted to do. And I thought 15 months, like just making the team, is a realistic goal. And then I could make my big gold medal winning performance 4 years later in London. And so my goal was just to make the team. And I broke that 15 months down into very obvious milestones, which were the competitions that were between when I started training and the Olympics. So I had to go to a state championships to qualify for nationals, to qualify for worlds, to qualify for Olympic trials, to qualify for the Olympics. So that broke it down into very obvious, structure. And that period, at those milestones, I broke those goals down into monthly goals. So I had a goal for each month leading into the Beijing Games. Each month I broke down into weekly goals. Each week I broke down into daily goals. And each day I even broke down dive by dive. And literally every single dive I did in that 15 months, I thought to myself, I put myself in that position standing on the end of the platform, and I just thought to myself, okay, this dive is for Olympic gold. And I manufactured the pressure within myself of being in that situation to make sure that I was applying like all the passion, all the intensity, all the vigor in training, like not letting my foot off the gas pedal at all, because I needed to make the most of this 15 months. And I was probably only able to do that because the coach actively created this training environment where I felt included for exactly who I was. Because in that year off that I had made a promise to myself that I was going to be completely upfront and honest with everyone I met, because I'd had the experience of sort of being in the closet, and it was horrible. It caused me a lot of sadness and distress and loneliness. And so I promised I was never going to do that again. And the coach was so good at, making sure that I knew that I was accepted by everyone in the training environment. Like, he set the tone for the whole squad. We would go to team dinner sometimes and he'd go, Matt, like, why don't you invite your boyfriend? Or, Matt, stop checking out those boys. Or, make it like just, constantly, creating that inclusive environment so that I knew that was not an issue. And so I was happy. I was really, really happy in that training environment. And so I was able to be present. I wanted to be present. And that's what enabled me to so constantly be able to make those fine adjustments to perfect technique all the time. And so I qualified for the Olympics, and along with a few of my teammates. And so in the lead up to the games, the Sydney Morning Herald, so one of the biggest newspapers in Australia, if not the biggest, a journalist came out to the pool and was interviewing me and a few other of my teammates who made the team one-on-one. And so this was just a profiling us. And so the journalist was asking me all the run-of-the-mill questions, how old I was, where I live, who I live with. And because I'd just gotten so comfortable and natural with it, I just blurted out, oh yeah, I live with my boyfriend. And you should have seen her eyes light up, like cartoon salivating, like, journalistic gold. No, it wasn't quite like that. But yeah, she did. She legitimately got really, really excited. But then she actually asked me if I wanted that to go in the story, because while she thought that everyone would support me, she also knew the stigma that the gays don't get the big endorsement deals. And, there was no other openly gay athletes at the time. And so I went home and I spoke about it with, my boyfriend at the time and a few other people. But at the end of the day, I decided that I wanted Australia to know exactly who they were supporting should they choose to get behind me. Pardon the pun. Oh my God, I can't believe I just made a gay joke. But are there any questions about how that works?
That was great. Keep doing that.
Can you promise to do 2 more puns?
2 more. Well, they might just come out naturally. I'm like a bit of a dad joke fiend. But this it was honestly it was the best decision I ever made, because it was 99.99% overwhelmingly positive and supportive from the public, from the media, from everyone, and I gained this huge community from around the world. And it was just, it was a surreal experience, because, after the Olympics, I'd be walking down Brunswick Street Mall in Brisbane in Fortitude Valley, which is, you know, quite rough. And, you know, and you'd hear this voice just go, "Hey, you dude, are you the diver dude?" And like, normally that would make me absolutely shit myself. And then, you know, like, turn around with, you know, trepidation, and they go, "Yeah, dude, you're fucking awesome." Well, I just said that, but I shouldn't. Yeah, but that's paraphrasing, no quoting, so I'm allowed to do it. But yeah, it was just so that experience was the best choice, one of the best choices I ever made in my life, because, you know, it showed me that me being my authentic self and putting myself out there and taking the risk, it had these incredible benefits. And it also helped me to go into Beijing sort of not with this huge weight of, you know, like, what if I do, you know, really well? Like, this is going to be a really super awkward coming out experience, like, afterwards. And I didn't care if.
Just one question. When you earlier on you mentioned, and sorry, it was a burning question. You said ask if it's a burning question.
Absolutely.
At the beginning, you mentioned, like, you know, when you were younger, you had that sort of desire to, like, you didn't know what it was, but you wanted to be the best at something, right? And then,
yeah,
I guess in the same time where you're starting to make these kind of decisions, for example, respond to a journalist and make that call in that moment to go down that path and you know, take that journey, which obviously turned out to be the right one, but in the moment I'm sure it wasn't as easy as you're describing now, and maybe it was, but it was kind of that moment. How did the position of your confidence in respect to, like, kind of knowing how good you started to, you know, I'd imagine by that point you kind of, did you start back, you know, does it come to a point where you're, like, backing yourself as that athlete and as that person who is so good at what they're doing in that moment? Did that kind of help in the kind of some of those challenges, or were they two separate? Was there, like, the sports side where you're just like, I'm getting good, I'm the bee's knees, and then there's the kind of the personal side, which is always that, you know, it's obviously a bit more personal, and so it's a bigger challenge. And did they cross over? Did they help each other? Were they separate, etc.?
Sure. My initial response to that was feeling like they were separate, but because I was, like, getting confident in my own abilities, sports-wise, because like, my trajectory was just going up and up and up leading into the Beijing Games. Like, every international comp I did, you know, I got, you know, 2 bronze medals in one, and then I got silver in the next one. And then the last international event I did, that was before the Games, the last one, I actually won. And that was the first international event that I'd won. And it just happened to be the last one before the Games. So I knew that my trajectory was going, you know, in the right direction. And, you know, like, my initial feeling of saying, like, that they were completely separate, I just realized it might not necessarily be true, because, you know, I did remember thinking, like, this is going to save a really awkward coming out moment in case I do really well at the Games. I don't want to have to then go and do that after people have already gotten to know me or know their perception of me. And I would rather have had nobody support me at the Games, and be myself than to have, you know, have to do that awkward thing afterwards. So yeah, in a way, like, it was interlinked in a way, but it was more important for me to be authentic. And I think it did help me go into Beijing lighter, especially because, you know, after the Sydney Morning Herald, you know, I was front page of the Sydney Morning Herald, gay and going for gold. So, you know, it's like, hey, it's like, I'm out. Yeah, it's pretty spectacular coming out. But it did help me go in lighter, because I did feel supported. I had this huge community from around the world. You know, my Facebook page went from, like, nothing to, like, 50,000 overnight. Like, it was awesome, you know. So I got to Beijing, and, like, the best. Honestly, like, the village is like this bizarre utopia where everything is lush and green and perfect, and everyone is tall and muscular and beautiful, and the men are too. Like, everything is so clean and perfect. And like, then it's surrounded by these 3-meter tall razor wire fences. And on the other side, it's just kind of like dust and like almost, yeah, it's just really different. And the food halls are like football fields side by side and completely lined with like every different kind of cuisine you could think of. So you've got, you know, your Asian corner, you've got your Middle Eastern, you've got your halal, you've got your kosher, you've got your salad bar, you've got your dessert bar, you've got your breakfast bar, you've got your Italian. It's like, and McDonald's over there as well with a McCafe, because that's the best coffee in the whole place. All the other coffee is shit, and everybody knows it, which is really annoying because the lineup for McCafe is so long. But yeah, so that was incredible. And then so I actually, and they try to keep the athletes as entertained as possible. So they've got these like big entertainment hubs where it's like pool table after pool table after pool table after pool table, like, you know, about 18 of them in a row. And then like all of these computers over that side, and then all of these PlayStations and Xboxes over that side, and Wii's and giant Jenga, and they try to keep everybody really entertained. But I spent all my time in my room because the men's 10-meter event was the night before the closing ceremony. So there was like 2 weeks of like not doing very much, and I didn't want anything to jeopardize my chance of doing as well as I could. So so I spent all my time just in my room, in between, like going to the pool, training, coming back to my room, and like reading, and just trying to avoid, like, I don't know, flying rocks or, you know, just ridiculous stuff that could potentially injure me. And so the way the competition, I finally came to competition day. And the way competition works is you've got your prelims, your semis, and your finals. So prelims, all 50 divers dive, and the top 18 go through to the semifinals, and then the top 12 in the semifinals go through to the finals. And so I came second in the prelims after one Chinese diver. So it went China, me, China. And then in the semifinals, I came second again, but after the other Chinese diver. So I went China, me, China. The Chinese divers swapped their rankings. And so I, you know, being I guess a realist, which is actually kind of more like a pessimist and trying to protect myself from getting expectations. But anyway, I used to call myself a realist. And I used to think, okay, well, both Chinese divers have beaten me. So, you know, I have a realistic chance of coming third. But then I realized that was not really helpful thinking. And so, you know, I tried to push that out of my mind. And I was doing the competition, like, and all my dives were quite good. But I wasn't following the progressive scores after each round. So, like, you know, after all the divers did their first dive, you know, they would rank everybody. And after all the divers did their second dive, they would rank everyone again. I didn't pay attention to that because I didn't want any of these external little factors to influence the way I dive, because I'd spent months crafting my art of competition. Like I experimented with every variable that you could think of in all of the competitions leading up to the Olympics. Like I experimented with, you know, what kind of food to eat, whether to talk to other people between dives, or you know, whether to nap in between competitions, or like even like what kind of music to listen to. And I experimented with everything and kept the stuff that worked and, you know, threw out the stuff that didn't. So I knew how to compete, and I didn't want all of these extra little outside things to influence, you know, because I didn't want to be like, oh, I'm coming second. If I try extra hard, I'm going to dive better. Like I already knew how to dive really well. I didn't need all that extra stuff. But I was diving really well. And we got to the last dive, and I was standing in the stairwell, and the Chinese diver, so because I was between the two Chinese divers, the Chinese diver before me did his dive, and the whole crowd went, ooh. And I was like, oh, no, I don't want to hear this. La, 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 as the judges read out their scores, because I didn't want that. I didn't want to know if he dived really. I just didn't want to know. And it was my turn, and I was walking to the end of the platform, and I must have been aware enough that millions of eyes were on me, because, you know, any footage that you can see of me walking to the end, I'm like doing my hair. Presentation is important. I got to the end, turned around, and I just thought to myself, this is just like training. Just relax, enjoy yourself and have fun. I didn't need to say to myself, this is for Olympic gold. I didn't need more pressure on me in that moment. I'd already practiced being in this moment. So it was just like training. And it was one of those textbook in the zone moments that you read about, where all the people on the grandstands on either side, they all just faded to black and time slowed down, and all I could hear was the sound of the spray on the water. And it felt like the whole thing just went in slow motion. And before I knew it, I was under the water, and the dive felt good, but I wasn't entirely sure. And then I started thinking, like, what if the dive was good? What would that mean? But then I started thinking, well, what if the dive wasn't good? Like, what would that mean? And when I couldn't stay under the water any longer, I finally broke the surface and just saw the whole crowd going absolutely ballistic, like jumping up and down, like throwing their wigs onto the pool deck, like going crazy. And that's when I knew that I'd done a really good dive. So I turned around and was thanking the crowd, as is customary in China, to say thank you for your support. And then my scores came up on the board at 10, 10, 9.5, 10, 10, 9.5, 9.5, and I lost it. I was blubbering because my name came up on top of the leaderboard as number one. And I had thought to myself before my dive, like, if my name comes up on top of the leaderboard, I've got an Olympic silver medal, because the Chinese diver after me, he's obviously going to win. And it did. And so I was crying, like howling for an Olympic silver medal. It was beyond my wildest dreams, beyond what I thought was ever possible. And so I walked over to the side to see my coach, to give my coach a hug. We all stopped and watched the last diver do his dive, and he completely fluffed it, like huge bomb, ended up coming fourth. And that's when the entire diving community, all the divers, all the coaches, all the support staff from every country literally engulfed me on pool deck, and all like took their time to wait, like waited their turn to give me a hug and congratulate me. And it took like half an hour to get through everybody. And then I had to do the medal ceremony. And it was just relief, honestly. Like I was relieved. I was so relieved that everything had been worth it, just all of the, all of the training, all of the trains, all of the, living off like Maggi noodles and tuna, like going through all of that, like it had all, and even like all of the years of training before that, like it had all been worth it. It was such a feeling of relief. You have no idea.
Wow.
And then I got this. So this is my medal. It's lovely and heavy. It's heavy with success, So all medals for every game. Sorry, I'm just trying to get it so it doesn't get the flare. So every Olympic Games, this has the same side. This is the same for every game. So this is Nike, the Greek goddess of victory, inside a stadium. And then it says the 29th Olympiad. And then on this side is the side that's individual to every Games. So there we go. And so it's got diving up the top. It's got the Beijing sort of logo there, and then the men's platform event there. And so this white ring, so jade stone is quite valuable in China. And jade is normally dark green. And so all of the bronze medals had a ring of dark green jade. The silver medals had a ring of a pale gray green mottled jade. And white jade is the rarest and most valuable kind of jade. And so the gold medals had a ring of white jade in them. And it's lovely Chinese silk that frays easily, especially when you're jumping up and down with it. And they also dent quite easily, as you can see here from dropping it. Any questions on any of that? Oh, there's also a tooth mark here from doing the customary like.
Hey Matt, I have a question on, I guess, everyone dreams of being in the Olympics, but more so that kind of final moment of performing, and you just know all the sweat and tears and work that was involved to get you to that moment. Are there any, I guess, how do you concentrate with everything going on that final dive? Like, I know you kind of talked through it, but is there a strategy, or are there certain things that you tune out or think about as you prepare yourself?
Yeah, it's like actively like saying, because I did have that thought just before I was about to go, like, oh, if my name comes up on top of the leaderboard, I've got a silver medal. And I'm just like, nope, not helpful, la, 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 just no, like just dive. And so having something to focus, like actively pushing out those thoughts, but then also actively consciously like thinking, okay, so, you know, I have to jump tall, I have to do 2.5 twists, and I have to do a round pike, and just repeating that stuff over and over to myself again. Like, so, because if you keep on repeating something to yourself over and over again, and you occupy your mind like that, you don't leave room for intrusive thoughts to come in, you know, because your mind is so like concentrating and focusing on this one thing. So that's how I did it. And so after Beijing, like, I mean, it was amazing what, you know, winning the Olympics can do. Like, all of a sudden I was, you know, popular and pretty and funny and handsome, and like, yeah, it's like this gold medal bestows these magical powers. It's like gold medal goggles on everybody that looks at you. And for some reason, I decided to look at the world rankings after the Olympics, and I discovered that because a Chinese diver had won more events earlier in the year than I had, and the world rankings are based on total accrued points over the year, I was actually ranked number 2 in the world. And so that childhood thought started going around in my mind, like, I'm still not the best in the world. And while I did use that as motivation to set a new goal, it also started this spiral of self-doubt and self-esteem stuff for me, which was actually really stuff that had been from my teenage years that I'd never actually addressed, because my depression as a teenager, I'd gotten a period of relief from it when I changed cities and had this new environment, and, you know, like, and everything was sort of working, and I had a goal to work towards. So I never actually addressed any of that stuff, and it came back with a vengeance after Beijing. And I felt that I had no value as a person. It was the only thing that had value was the medal. That's the only thing that anybody cared about. And, you know, even though I did end up getting my world #1 ranking in 2010, it was still a very hollow achievement. And I didn't feel validated, and I didn't feel all the love, and I didn't feel happy that I was supposed to, or that I thought I was going to. And I realized that, you know, that's obviously depression, but I felt a lot of shame around that, because I felt like my feelings were unjustified, because, you know, I've got the world at my feet. And, you know, feeling bad about feeling bad doesn't make you feel less bad. It makes you feel more bad. And so the shame also prevented me from reaching out and getting help. And so I tried to, I guess, medicate that the same way that I did as a teenager, and that was, you know, with drink and drugs. And you know, I got injured around the same time, and so, you know, that's when my addiction took off with a vengeance. And that injury meant that I had to spend 3 months of bed rest to let some stress fractures in my back heal. And when that 3 months was over, it wasn't as easy to stop using as what I thought it was going to be. And, you know, I promised myself with every single cell in my body that, you know, I wasn't going to use drugs again. And every single time that I made that promise with absolute conviction, and I couldn't keep it, it just tore my self-esteem in half again and again and again, until it got to the point where, like, I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. And I finally reached out for help and went to rehab. And that was the best thing I ever did, because that's where I learned that the drugging was a symptom of my depression and not the cause of it, like I initially had thought. And that's when I learned that I had such low self-esteem, and that my esteem for years had been entirely based on other esteem, outside esteem. So, you know, how I felt about myself was entirely dependent on my achievements, on, you know, feedback that I got from the judges. If I got an 8, they thought I was good. If I got a 9, they thought I was great. And if I got a 10, they thought I was perfect. You know, like, I'd become basically a human doing rather than a human being. and all my self-worth was entirely dependent on my achievements. And so I learned about self-esteem. I learned about reframing thoughts, which was really helpful because I had to go to London to defend my Olympic title, where, you know, if it's framed that way, even a silver medal would have been a failure because I hadn't defended my Olympic title. And I was finding that was becoming really counterproductive to my preparation because but I did end up going because I was still the best person to represent Australia. And, you know, I didn't end up doing very well. I came 13th, which meant that I missed out on the finals, which then meant more ugly crying, like snot in mouth crying, you know, with cameras sort of streaming that to television screens all over the world. Not a pretty look. And all of these thoughts started going around in my head, like, I'm still not the best in the world. I hadn't done my best, and my family had wasted all this money, and I was about to do the walk of shame through the media zone. And so I had to turn that around and go, no, I didn't do my best, but I certainly tried my best. I could never have done anything more. In fact, I should have done much less in the lead up to London to have prevented all of these re-injuries that I was having. And yes, my family had spent lots of money, but they wanted to support me. So it took me about 6 hours of me repeating this stuff to myself ad nauseum over and over again for me to actually start believing the bull that I was telling the media, but I did start to believe it. And so I came back to the pool later that evening to watch the finals that I should have been in. And it was a very unusual position for me to be in because I had never not been in a final before. And I was overcome with this most profound sense of pride for these boys who were diving in the finals for doing what I was doing 4 years earlier. And that pride that I felt for them, I was actually able to feel it for myself. And then in that moment, that was kind of the very first time I didn't consider my win in Beijing a fluke. And that was, you know, so I ended up coming out of London with something even more valuable than what I came out of Beijing with. I came out of it with, you know, a mental and an emotional win that was more meaningful because it meant I could actually appreciate what I had come out of Beijing with. You know, I felt like I earned it for the first time. Like, you know, so even though it wasn't that successful, I guess, as far as rankings and outcomes go, it was much more validating for me. And I could not have done that if I hadn't have been through, you know, that journey of personal development and actually put all of that work into my mental health in the lead up to the London Games. And so I continued to do, having seen the benefit of it, I continued to put all that work in after London. You know, I did end up doing another Commonwealth Games after London, and because that was the one thing that was missing from my you know, golden trifecta trophy cabinet. So I had like the Olympic gold and I had the world #1, and like I just wanted a Commonwealth gold. Like that would have been really nice. And I got it. Yay, I'm amazing. But I also was really scared of retiring. Like I just wanted to quit while I was ahead, but I was really reluctant to retire and really scared of retiring because I've seen so many athletes go right off the rails because, you know, all their identity and everything is tied up with this sport. And I felt the same way, like, who am I if I'm not a diver? And so I luckily had written a book called Twists and Turns, where I shared everything, you know, my history with mental ill health and addiction and recovery from drug addiction. And then I ended up turning that into a cabaret show, which gave me something to really focus all my time and energy and passion into, which was a wonderful thing to transition with. But it also was incredibly rewarding for me because I did share my story very openly on stage, very raw. I'm a very good actor. So like I cried on stage every night. And afterwards I would do meet and greets with people, and people would share things with me that they've never felt comfortable sharing with other people before. One, because I started the conversation, and two, because I had exposed myself and been so raw and so vulnerable. I guess there wasn't that power imbalance So like, because I'd been so raw, they felt they were able to be really raw with me as well. And they felt safe to share with me. And so that was a very powerful and very validating experience for me to do that show. I performed that show over 80 times. And so, and like I still do some performances here and there. Since then, I've gotten married and, you know, traveled a little bit, come back home to be Australian again in isolation. And I guess doing my best to, like, yeah, well, I'm sharing, I guess, part of, you know, what I do now, and part of how I keep my, keep esteeming myself is to keep on sharing my story. Because because it seems to help people, I guess, and also I do goal setting workshops as well, which seems to help people. So I've learned that the secret, the thing that is the most effective thing for me to feel better about myself is to be of service to others, is to help other people. That makes me feel like a good person. Questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I know you kind of made reference to before about sort of other athletes, you know, when they finish their careers as Olympians or even as athletes, like elite athletes. Like, you kind of see it on TV or you hear about it on the news that, you know, they've kind of gone off the rails or whatever. But I guess like my question is, like, have you've been through your stuff, have you kind of witnessed other people or people around you in your community who have done similar things to you? And is it like quite common that people do that in the Olympic community and like elite athlete community?
Yeah. So I was part of a panel called Game Over on SBS, where we actually spoke about this exact thing. And I believe, and this is what my second show, a large theme in the second cabaret show that I wrote called Under the Covers, was about this transition. And so my theory is that, you know, the Olympics and competing is like the most intense high experience that you ever, like, naturally could ever feel in your entire life. Like, it's very, very, you know, lots of peaks. It's just, it's a very extreme environment. It's, and you hear a lot of athletes say after competitions, but particularly the Olympics, they say, I had a come down after the Olympics, which that terminology is also used for, you know, upper drug, like stimulant drugs. You have a come down because your body just releases all of the happy hormones, and then you're left depleted afterwards, and so you feel very depressed and very lethargic and very, you know, low mood and unmotivated. And so I guess, you know, I realized that it is very similar, you know, because it is, even though it's a natural event, it releases unnatural levels of, you know, of all those hormones. You know, you're unnaturally excited. There's unnatural levels of, you know, excitement and overwhelm, especially if you do very well at the Olympics. And so my theory is that, like, after athletes retire, you know, normally they go either one of, like, often, not normally, I don't want to say that this is like, you know, what happens with everyone, but with those that it does happen to, it goes either one of two ways. They either start drinking a lot to numb their feelings or distract themselves, or, you know, like, just pass the time, or they go to sort of stimulant drugs that recreate the highs. And that's when it starts to spiral, either of those situations. And so I knew that I'm very susceptible to that kind of behavior. And so I'm so lucky that I went through that stuff years before, and I was already, you know, a couple of years into recovery by the time I retired from sport, because I still found it hard, but I had the awareness, and I had the support people around me, and I had things to throw my time and energy into. Like, because the other thing is, you know, if you're used to training 6 to 8 hours a day, what do you do with all that time but think? Like, you're just left with your head. also you're going from being, all the esteem of being at the top of one area, and if you're like me and you put all your eggs in one basket with sport, then you have to start at the bottom of the ladder of another area of life, a career or education or whatever it is. And you're often, 15, 20 years behind your peers doing that. So, and also, you're not getting that same community that you would spend, 8 hours a day being with people as well. You miss out on that connection as well. So, I believe there are lots and lots of contributing factors as to why. And it's not just the, if I'm not an athlete anymore, who am I? Kind of identity crisis. There are lots of factors that go into it. So, so I was really lucky that I really, I caught it, I predicted it, that I would struggle, and, put preventative measures in to make sure that I didn't, go down that path again.
Yeah.
And so now I'm several years, I'm 5 years sober now.
Wow.
Yeah. Congratulations.
So this, lemon lime and bitters. This is my special fizzy fancy drink.
So fancy.
It is fancy.
I was
Any other
wondering,
questions?
with your background in your childhood, do you think without that you wouldn't have done diving, or do you think you're always a driven person that would have taken you to do something to a pretty high level?
Yeah, so I believe that that my childhood is. I don't believe I would have felt as compelled to keep diving throughout my teenage years had I not had such an emotional driving factor through all of that. It was a very powerful emotion, and even though it was a negative emotion, I guess the want to be special, it was powerful enough to keep me through that. And I go through this with my goal setting workshop that and this is one of the ways that I build in fail safes into the goal setting, is by imbuing these goals with emotions, with very powerful emotions. But I believe that a positive emotion is more productive, is better than a negative emotion. A negative emotion, can do the job, but the negative emotion didn't make the goal very rewarding. So, if it had been a positive emotion, wanting to better myself rather than wanting to, an internal thing rather than an external thing, if I get this goal, I'm going to be loved externally, but by feeling it internally and going and just sitting there and feeling those feelings of, how I'm going to feel when I achieve this goal. I'm going to feel proud, and I'm going to feel accomplished, and I'm going to be, successful. I'm going to feel successful within myself, and actually taking the time to feel those feelings, it really imbues the goal with a very powerful something that makes it a lot easier to, to keep going when you're starting to, lose a bit of that motivation. And, I feel like, maybe if I didn't consider diving to be my one ticket to being special, I wouldn't have held on for so long. So I have no regrets. Probably lots of trauma, but no regrets from my childhood. Because it's made me the person who I am today.
Do you think
and I don't. Huh?
Sorry, I was just going to say, do you think it would have been easier if it was 10 years on, rather if you were born 10 years later?
I don't know, because I don't have that anything to compare it to.
Just having other athletes, it's just, you said when you started there was nobody else who come out, so you pioneered the way. So having younger people now go through that, not having to go through what you went through, I was thinking.
Sure, it probably would have been easier, yes, because I didn't grow up with any gay. My diving hero, Greg Louganis, is the most famous diver in history, and he is gay, but he didn't come out until after he retired. There was an English footballer in the 90s, Justin Fashanu, who came out and then was constantly he ended up committing suicide because of the homophobic sort of abuse and feeling like he was going to be treated badly, and he was treated quite badly by a lot of the fans, which ended up leading to a suicide. So I didn't have great role model. I didn't have a lot of evidence to suggest that I was going to be okay. But what it has given me is pushing through that fear and maintaining my integrity meant that I competed openly, and to my knowledge, I am the first openly gay Olympic champion ever.
Wow.
And that's something that nobody can ever take away from me. Like, I've still got an Olympic record for the highest scoring dive in history. Somebody's going to beat my record one day, but something that nobody can ever take away from me is being the first. And that is something I'm incredibly proud of. And if I had been born, like, I started a trend, man. Like, there were only 11 openly queer people in Beijing. That had like more than doubled by the time London came around, and then doubled again by the time Rio came around. Like, I'm a trendsetter. Everyone just wants to be like me. Yes.
That's awesome.
So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for everything. And you have to choose to find the benefit of everything, or find the lesson in everything. Because being resentful about stuff serves no purpose other than to just poison myself. Resentments don't punish anybody else. Resentments only punish yourself. And so it often has to be a conscious choice to find the lesson in that, to find the benefit, and even out of making mistakes. Like, they're only mistakes if you don't learn from them. Because if you do, then they're learning opportunities. They're opportunities for growth. Painful experiences are opportunities for growth. An easy life is you don't learn anything from it. You don't grow from an easy life. You grow from challenges. That's what makes people grow. That's what makes people interesting. Nobody enjoys a story of a kid who was born with a silver spoon in their mouth. We love grit. We're really sadistic. Yeah. I'm a sadistic person too. I love hearing about your shit. I guess any other questions?
Good.
Right. Well, in that case, I just wanted to end on a little something.
Oh.
This is my friend. I just wanted to just a cute little ditty, and then I will bid everybody good night and say, well, I want to say thank you all so much for being a part of this, for joining me tonight. I'm so glad that I got to share it with you all. And I've got these experiences on Airbnb, so the storytelling experience, also the goal setting workshop. So please, if you do, actually, I know you've got goals, so sign up for it, and we can work together again.
That's amazing. Thanks so much. That's incredible.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Let's hear it.
5 for 2, eyes are blue, but oh, what does 5 feet can do? Does anybody sing my girl? Turned up nose, turned down hose, a flapper, yes sir, one of those. Has anybody seen my girl? Now if you run into a 5 foot 2 covered with fur, diamond rings and all those things, you bet your ass it isn't her. But could she love, could she woo, could she coo? Has anybody seen, has anybody seen, has anybody seen my girl? Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. You're a star. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
See everybody.